It's a little happy day in the studio. I'm just going to show you how to add some fabric over the top of a resist because someone asked. So this is the second little video. So this is some muslin scrim. I've got some 16 ply wool and some paper yarn which I'm experimenting with, and this is just a scrap of scrim, so I'm putting that over like that, and then I'm just going to roughly cut around this edge. And I'm going to get my net and give it a little pat. Excuse my fingers, I've been gardening and I have garden bits all over the place, rough fingers. So that's the scrim over the surface. I'm going to turn that over and I'm going to pull this scrim around to the other side. So this is how you completely encase a template in fabric. Now I quite like, with using the muslin, I like where it overlaps. So I love the lines that makes, and they're very random. So when you're using a very fine fabric, it doesn't matter that you've got overlapping pieces, and I will actually just add other little pieces. You can see there's some spaces here where it has no fabric, and I'm just going to add some little pieces. I love the selvage or the edge of the piece because I think that gives things just a really beautiful texture. You can hear lots of work going on in the studio in the background. It's Daisy doing some rolling. So now on the other side, it's going to look quite plain in comparison. So if you have a look here, that's a really nice, nice coverage. I've got no spaces. I'm just going to pat that down with my net. Just make sure that everything is covered. And where there is overlap, I'm overlapping at least 1 centimetre. With the very fine fabric, you can really get away with overlapping a lot. Now I'm going to rub that with some soap. That just helps everything to stay where I want it to stay. And then I'm going to turn that over, and this side is going to be plain in comparison because it doesn't have all of those nice little bits of overlap. So I'm going to add some little bits to this side, and that's what I always do so that it doesn't look different to the other side. We want the thing the piece to look as if it's in the round. So I'm just adding those little extra bits around as well, leaving a sort of bunched up edge with the muslin. And just a little bit here as well. Okay, so that's covered, and then I'll just give this a little rub with some soap as well. Then I will just rub as usual, rubbing into the centre, and that will start the felting process. So under the fabric, I just had 4 quite thick layers. I did it quite quickly, so I just did thicker layers. And I will rub this until the fabric has started to join to the wool. And then I'll use my finger just to see if if the fabric is still moving, then I need to rub a little more before I start rolling. So I want this to be, the fabric to be attached to the wool before I start the rolling process. So just giving that a little bit of a rub and having a look to see here if the fabric is moving on the surface. Now I have got some thicker layers here, and so I need to give those a little bit of special attention. I put the 16 ply wool in just to give a bit of texture to the surface of the pod. So I'm going to rub in between those layers of 16 ply wool. Once I'm happy with how this side is, then I'll go back to the reverse and rub it. Okay, so that seems to be sticking on quite nicely. I'm just going to turn that over, and this is the other side. You can only do this with a very fine fabric. So I would suggest you could do this with a fine butter muslin like I'm using, which is a straining muslin. It has very, you can see through here, it's quite gappy. Yep, so that's that. Or a tissue silk or any sort of meshy fabric. I've got one here actually just laying about the studio. That's a cotton mesh, Indian cotton mesh scarf. That could be really interesting on the surface. This is some crinkle chiffon. Anything that's nice and fine. This one's a silk organza mesh, and again that can look quite nice. So that just gives you a few ideas. The fabric that I would avoid using with this technique would be page silk. That's not a good mix. Marjolaine silk will work quite well. Yeah, anyway, I hope that gives you a little bit of inspiration, and I will, on the cover page of this video, post a little picture of the actual pod once it's finished. So thanks for listening, and happy felting.